Hey everyone, so we are back again with Crystal. Crystal also has an MBTI channel that sort of goes more in depth into the cognitive functions. So would you like to reintroduce yourself for people who have not watched our previous video on ENFP career path?
Oh my gosh, I forgot the one I used last time. So, hi everyone, I'm Crystal. I'm an ENFP. I live in Los Angeles in America, and yeah, I'm a tarot reader and a spiritual entrepreneur and coach. And I do a bunch of writing, and yeah, I make videos on type, and a bunch of other topics too. So yeah, you can follow along if you would like.
Yeah, I will put the link in the description box. And today we are continuing our sort of like discussion on the FiTe paradox, which we began a little bit in the previous video, but today we are
Mhm.
going to be going in depth into how the cognitive functions Fi and Te can like work with each other and how they show up in FPs and TJs. And there's one thing I wanted to talk about, just like as an introduction to this paradox videos, is that I feel like a lot of people in the MBTI community, they tend to have very sort of like how do I put it, like stereotypical understandings. For example, they would like group the thinkers together and group the feelers together and like the sensors and the intuitors, which on the surface it makes sense because like they do have similar tendencies for sure. But then we also have to recognize that we technically do value different functions in our
Mhm.
main function stack, and we can also
Mhm.
use other functions. It just depends on our how much we value them and how much we are exposed to them. And Fi users definitely have Te in their main like functions that they value, and vice versa. So it doesn't mean that because you are maybe an Fi user, you cannot value Te and cannot develop Te. So
Mhm.
and the opposite is true as well. It so like just making sure that people recognize that we do have all the functions.
I think FPs and TJs, they both really value efficiency, but I think the reason why so many stereotypes exist in the community is actually because people look at TE through the lens of, or not even just TE, just like all the functions. We kind of pay more attention to
The stronger
um,
ones,
well, like
the
also
ones
like
earlier.
how they show up in like actions, right? Like FE is like
Right.
warmth. Like someone's using FE if they're being really like gushy or nice or accommodating, and someone's
Hmm.
using TE if they're being really like blunt or something. When in reality, that's not like the only way they show up. They're also responded to all the time, and that's what I think about. So I guess I think FPs use TE because they really like they respond to facts just like TE users do. Like we don't have a cohesive sort of thought process that's like rooted in everything we've ever thought. It's very like what we are thinking at this moment makes sense. We kind of look at externalities a lot. And FPs are always doing that, whether they act cold or put it to good use, they still are doing that. And I find the phenomenon with TJs is I'll say like one thing and I'll feel like they finish my sentence like all the time. But also to be fair, like I also develop my TE a lot because of just, working in the professional world with the careers I have. And I guess also just like growing up a lot around FETI users and feeling very like misunderstood where they couldn't like follow like my emotional reasoning. And then like I'll kind of I guess I type people also a lot based on like what they lack. So I'll notice that like if I share something that I know is like FI of like some vulnerable thing, an FETI user, whether it's an FJ or TP, will kind of like stare at me blankly before saying something that's very general that doesn't actually engage with what I'm trying to say and make me feel kind of like, why did I even say that then? Versus even like a TJ, they come off so like, cold or something. But if I'm like really vulnerable, they'll say something that indicates that they understand the feeling I'm responding to and the objective or point I'm trying to achieve. So I guess like it comes down to like, especially as an ENFP, I'm always comparing my singular experience of one event to all the others I've had. And I found commonalities that like TJs, I mean, like you're not going to see them be super nice because they won't show it, but I can kind of follow that they are tracking with my FI when I speak. And similarly, if I have a question or objective I want to reach when I'm like co-working with a TJ in a professional environment, I always feel like they instantly they address that specific objective. They don't go into all the other logical, cohesive things that it's tied to, which can be distracting because I don't have TI. And that's kind of how TIF users are. They like to talk about like sort of like how one task we're doing connects to like a bigger picture, when sometimes I'm like, is this like I just want to address like a singular sort of thing. So I guess I feel like it's almost like there's a synergy with TJs that exists because like I feel like whatever I am trying to get accomplished, they catch on to it faster than like other types basically. But again, this is like because I'm paying attention to the consistency of like what I have, which is FI, and what I don't have, which is TI. And I can always tell when an FJ or TP is making a point that I have no idea how to respond to. So it's not like what happens to me doesn't happen to them too. Like I say something FI, they're like, what? They say something TI, I'm like, what? But like I never have this what sort of confusion with TJs. And for me at least, because TI is like my blind spot, I perpetually find myself in a state of confusion, and I would much rather do something or like fix like myself on a super like specific goal just to distract from all the other things I haven't connected about like why I'm doing what I'm doing. And TJs just help me do that. So yeah, I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think the way we respond to our blind spot is kind of similar. I think many people respond to it like in a confused state, because I feel so confused when I talk to TJs when they use too much TE. I'm like, I can't get it. I just
You're like, what do you want
am
from me?
confused. Yeah, exactly. Like I just literally cannot understand unless they make it really clear, like step by step or something. But if they give a
Yeah.
general instruction, I'm not able to implement it the way that they want to most of the time.
Yeah, because you can't tell what they're like thinking and like why they want you to do that. Because chances are they're not like thinking about why. They're just like trying to be like, okay, this is what we need to do. And then if you don't see the context that fits into, I'm sure it's confusing then to like know how to do it correctly. And because you want like precision. And they're like, we're not here
Yeah.
for precision, we're here for efficiency. So your kind of objectives are different. Similarly, I think that like extroverted feeling with FE, they value like emotional efficiency. So if I'm sad, they think empathizing is kind of like validating that the feeling exists. And I'm like, I mean, duh, but like you're not actually engaging with me. So sometimes I'll feel kind of like, what do you want me to say to this thing that didn't actually address what I said, or vice versa? Versus it seems like TJs are actually able to figure out what to say correctly that I want faster. So I kind of base it off of that. And again, it depends on the environment, right? But I feel like in general, because you aren't using FI to track what the TE user wants from you, then therefore the confusion begins. Similarly, a TE user isn't using TI to connect with you. I almost think of it as like they have to use TI to access the FE, and you have to use FI to access the TE, and you don't do that constantly. So then it's like you're just staring at each other being like, okay, our objectives might even be in conflict because of how much we don't know what's going on almost.
Yeah. So also I'm kind of like confused sometimes when I mean I know that FPs and TJs can get along when they are sort of more self-aware. I mean that's what the kind of people I know that are probably like more self-aware and accepting of their inferior functions. But I also see situations where, sometimes I will hear a TJ talk and it sounds like they are frustrated with like overly sensitive people. And I'm just like, but isn't FP supposed to be sensitive? So I don't know. Like, do you feel like sometimes because like, for example, like they would talk about being realistic and practical, and I always feel like, but isn't the FP type not the typical realistic and practical people? And it just sounds like they are attacking you guys. I mean, not that they say that they are, but it just sounds that way. So how do you have you ever experienced that, and like how does that get resolved?
Yeah, so I actually know exactly what you're talking about. I personally don't experience it, kind of honestly by luck of the draw, like life circumstances, and I can explain why. But I think that like I'll just start with like my experience and then maybe try to make it more general.
Mhm.
For me at least, like because I like experienced a lot of just feeling invalidated constantly by I guess my ISFJ mom's like TI and honestly poor TE. I think I unconsciously grew up craving TE. Um, like for example, like I would be like cutting something or doing something, and she'd be like, "You're doing it wrong." And I'm like, "Okay, then just tell me how to do it right, and just show me how to do it right." And then she would like show me the right way, but not be able to explain the steps or follow what I'd done wrong. And I got so frustrated, like all the time at her for that. And it's funny because when I first learned about type in college, I was more drawn to using it to like understand how it fit into the context of like my childhood, because I was like, oh my god, like TI is like this manual of like your own line of thinking that I've always lacked, and no one wants to actually call me out and say something. So I guess for me, in response, in order to protect the fact that I know I'm very very sensitive and very like unable to validate like or unable to like seek other people's validation, I learned to like validate myself and learned how to like stick up for myself by explaining what I did know about my thought process. And as I got older, I realized that a lot of TI users would find that like kind of so confusing, but TE users would be like, okay, so you explained what your objective is. Here, try this. And then if I was like, okay, like that would get my objective done, but you have to consider this detail, which is like something my FI has thought about. They'd be like, oh, okay, then try this. So I guess basically what I'm trying to say is I feel like I've learned how to try to articulate what my goals are that would satisfy my FI, because like
Right.
FI users need to like be I guess like I've learned to be realistic about like what sort of logical end result would actually help my FI feel satisfied. And because I think about that constantly as a way to make up for like lack of TI and feeling bad about that growing up, and I know how to articulate it efficiently, TJs tend to really like me because they see that I'm really sensitive and emotional, but they also feel like if they tell me to do something, I can like explain how that does or doesn't like add up with my FI without getting mad or something. So I think it kind of is like if you don't learn to like stick up for your FI as an FP, you'll feel like oppressed by basically anybody, like not just like a TJ anyway. So
Mhm.
I do see why they would be frustrated by that, but I do think that like and you know how like you were saying earlier how like feelers lump all thinkers together and thinkers lump like all feelers together or
Mhm.
something. I do think that like you can have poor TE if you're like an FJ or an FP, and TJs will kind of look at them and be like, okay, they're both inefficient in slightly different ways.
Yeah,
But
but they are both frustrating to work with.
yeah, because but an FJ will be frustrating differently because they'll basically be like, no, you don't get it, but then not have like the TE to explain their TI. And an FP will just be maybe their priority will be like to feel their feelings all the way and feel sorry for themselves before they actually take action to make themselves feel better in a more sustainable way. So I see how like that comment can apply to both FPs and FJs,
Mhm.
but I think that a lot of FPs, especially like as you get older or just life circumstances where you're like, I have to develop TE or I'm going to continue to suffer in all aspects of my life, I feel like this problem gets alleviated over time if you're willing to do the work. And similarly, I think like what TJs really want is for people to like just explain what they're thinking. Like they just want someone to engage with whatever solution they give. So if a TJ gives me a solution, it's actually easy for me to translate what they think my objective is, and if it was like inaccurate, and I can easily be like, oh no, I'm actually trying to do this, and they'll be like, oh okay, and because I don't get offended because I've already accepted to myself that I'm just gonna often be confusing to people, because I don't get offended, it doesn't cause dissent. But I do know there's like FPs that I've known who have like TJ parents, or like TJ, like, I don't know, like older figures that are like super protective, and they don't let them explain all of their FI, and they're also not that good at giving their TE objectives. So that's like where it can clash. But I don't think it's like a clash that occurs if you work on self-developing. I think it's kind of like the clash would be there if you're just not self-developing anyway, because like no matter what, it's like you'll like just be probably pissing off everyone, not just a TJ anyway. But what I will say also is TJs that work on their FI have more patience because they recognize how they're really sensitive too, and that they react to a lot of like hidden FI triggers all the time. So a lot of TJs that like go to therapy or like kind of figure out that like they can't like just reject everyone. They have to like figure out who's their cup of tea and just, you know, rely on those people for more, or expect more from those people than other people. I think those TJs end up like enjoying that. They can sense that like FPs are more willing to quote do or explain themselves in the way that makes sense to the TJ, and it's just easier to get along with. Or like a TJ will look to like an FP as their like emotional conscience to like help them realize what their feelings even are, because FPs can be a mouthpiece for explaining that stuff. So it's also like on the TJ, because like if you don't have like the maturity or like life experience that has made you develop FI, you're gonna think everyone's too emotional for you, but you're also gonna be way too logical
that's what
for
I've heard
everyone.
often from them,
Yeah.
including my mom. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it just takes like people that are like mature, and like naturally the way that we develop is in that certain way. But I also think that the way we develop doesn't incorporate like the functions we don't use. Like I'm never gonna probably be like fully fluent in how to use TI. And a TJ is never also going to be fluent in that either. So it's like whatever. And we both like reject FE and TI in slightly different ways, even though to like a regular observer, it might seem like, oh, an FP is friendly, like an FJ, or a TJ is logical, like a TP. And it's like, no. It's like more complex than that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think though they can come to the same conclusions, but it's just the approach is really different, and the emphasis they have is really different. Yeah, I like the development part is really important because I think I've made it in a previous video that also triggered some people that it's basically about how we can get offended by people using our inferior function if we are not like self-aware that we have the same basically like what we ourselves are, because we tend to like, for example, even for my personality type, like I feel like when I wasn't developing I tended to be more offended by TI users. And you know, it's like they're so rude and blah blah. But after I developed TI, I'm like, okay, I understand why they do that. And it's actually quite important that they, you know, sometimes are quite blunt and stuff. So it really depends on how self-aware you are and how willing you are to be familiar with like other functions in, especially the ones you value, because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to function. I feel if we only use like the first two, you know, the more dominant like functions that we have, because it's just not balanced. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to also be like, I'm never gonna be like a TJ. And like
Like accepting that you are that
yeah,
way.
exactly. And well, through accepting that, it's also understanding that like I think of like the mouthpiece for my FI is TE. I say like, hey, don't do that. Like when I'm like pissed off, like I sound as scary as I guess a TJ would be. I become very cold and like shut down. But it's still like I'm not overall like a TJ, but that is like a language that they understand. Like if I go, don't do that, like a TJ isn't going to be like, why? Why shouldn't I do that? Like how a TP or someone with TI might need you to like articulate it or kind of like back away and like still be confused, like what? And like I guess like for a TJ, it's like they like also see it very simply at times in terms of like actions. And I thought of it as like the container for my FI is my TE. I'm not going to compare it to like someone else's TE, but my
Mhm.
TE will be easier to receive to someone who's a TJ compared to someone that doesn't have TE. Um, and I think that's really important too. It's like I subjectively use TE in a certain way that connects to my FI. And a lot of TJs use FI in a way that's subjective to what their emotional triggers and their emotional experience is. And I think making that distinction helps, I guess, the paradox, because it's like FI can be like feel, and then like they won't actually feel better till they like are like logical about it in a way that incorporates the FI. Like it's like, okay, like I'm taking responsibility to protect my FI by putting like certain like logical limits on who I tell what, when I do what is my cue that I'm hurt, I need to like back off. And that to me is all under the umbrella of what's considered like TE. And similarly, it's like a TE user, like a TE might seem harsh, and yet at the same time, FI is what helps them experience compassion. Like when they understand their wounds, then they can like hear someone else say a fact, and that can like kind of translate to them what that person's FI is experiencing. Like in the spiritual community, there are a lot of like NTJ empath healers too. And people are like, what? But those people seem so unempathetic because they don't have FE. And I'm like, they can actually be quite empathetic as well in a way that honestly sometimes feels, to me at least, more easily received, or actually like accounts for what I'm like experiencing emotionally more than like an FJ, which I guess no offense to you guys, it can often feel like you're giving me a platitude, like kind of like a general sort of, oh, I'm so sorry, as opposed to asking questions and engaging with it and being curious about my emotional experience. So it just kind of comes down to like also getting creative with how you see functions, because in a sense, TE is needed to obstruct FI from just eating itself. Um, and FTE is also needs FI to kind of loosen up its kind of standards of absolution. So yeah.
Right. So, how do you see the FI triggers in a TJ? Because this one it needs more explanation from your side, since I think for FJ and TP users, when we see the TJ being harsh, for example, we don't really see like the FI side of them as much as you do. So, how do you like how are you able to see like what they are, like the emotional side of them
Yeah.
when they don't show it that
When
obviously?
they're upset, whether it's at me or at something, I kind of look for like what are the inefficiencies of the situation and why does that like make them upset. Like basically I look for like what's like not working for them, like when they're like, because I guess like if they don't have everything like put together, they'll like get in a state of freak out or get in a state of like helplessness really easily if like things aren't aligned in a certain way and if there's no like easy solution immediately. So I don't know, it's like something unconscious where I can put myself in their shoes, because at this point in my life, inefficiency deeply triggers me too. And I'm just like almost auditing any situation or any information they've already given me to understand their experience of it, which is, oh my God, it's like all falling apart because this hasn't been done. And if it doesn't get done, then this, that, like, it's kind of like almost like this like short fuse starts getting shorter and shorter. So I look for like what isn't being done fast enough, what isn't being done like, honestly, yeah, it's like they hate people wasting their time. They hate like if they want something and there's no like real way for them to like get it. And if someone didn't do what they want and they don't know how to communicate with them, and then they're like freaking out because they feel trapped. I guess these are kinds of like common triggers for a TJ where like their FI and what's realistic, aka what can be done, and like how they actually feel about it. If there's like too much disparity, they like spiral. And like I think often they hate it when other people are confused and aren't contributing to helping. And I know it's like an FJ or TP is kind of like waiting to figure out what they're thinking so then they can offer some like solutions. But the TJ is like, okay, I gave you like 3 facts already. Why is that enough for you? Oh my God. And it gets more frustrated with like the slowness of things. And lack of inner peace at times. So I guess for me, like, I guess I'm pretty good at calming people down because I ask questions and I validate, like, hey, like, seems like you're really distressed because XYZ, is that correct? And I like kind of guess at what they're upset about. And I guess it's easier for me to guess because I have like more of a TE idea because I'm looking at all the facts and I'm like, okay, it could be like any one of these. Let me ask if it's this one or this one. It's like if a doctor is like, where does it hurt? Is it here? Is it here? Or I don't know. And then the TJ will like be like, no, it's because of this, this, this. And then often they just need someone to like kind of show them that they're not crazy for like being upset about that, and someone to like volunteer solutions to show them that they aren't the only person that's in distress over the thing or caring about that thing. So I don't know, I think that like they feel most comfortable when things are efficient, and if they aren't and they don't see a way out, then like they feel alone, and a lot of people like stare at them blankly when they're upset because they don't get upset that often. So when they do fly off the handle, they're also not articulating things in an FE way to make it feel like people can like approach them to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a TJ experiences intense pain as something that's very isolating because they don't have the words for it. And a lot of FPs have the patience and compassion to not get too frustrated too soon and stick with them until they like say what it is. So yeah.
I do feel like the different like order of the functions also make a huge difference. Like, for example, I quite easily understand what INTJ wants most of the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
but I don't really understand what the ESTJ or the ENTJ wants. Like, I'm much slower in processing what they want. So yeah, I think it's like the order also makes a difference because when we share the first function, it's like easier. It's
Well,
sort of
what about an ISTJ?
it depends. Like, I think it's also not that easy. Yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not as bad as the EXTJ, especially ESTJ, because we have like completely different functions, and ISTJs are a lot more calm. I feel when they are like explaining something, so they have more patience,
Yeah, I
and
think like their
that helps
FI,
me.
yeah,
Yeah,
their FI is higher, and I guess like yeah, they have an FE blind spot, but I do think that like they're able to consciously understand their emotion to some degree, and I think when a TE Dom is upset, they don't even like register it half the time. They just think that like it's something objectively anyone would be upset about. Why is no one else being upset? I guess I'm actually thinking like in my head that like the archetype I was I guess responding to just now was probably more of a TE Dom, where like they'll feel
yeah,
super alone. I think an ITJ can like figure out how to be a little more tactful because they're probably used to experiencing more FI regular, like they can like access their FI more easily. Whereas I think ETJs are just too busy doing things to like pause and realize it's there half the time. So yeah.
yeah. ITJs, I feel like they have a lot more. I mean, relatively to ETJs, they have a lot more patience when it comes to explaining things. So they are like efficient on their own, but they are
Mm-hmm.
like more patient to explain things to other people so they can sort of get it. Yeah. So I'm like not so
Yeah, yeah,
affected by that because I can
yeah.
like
I think
know
that
what to
like
do.
yeah, that's a good distinction because like I don't think that like ITJs blow up at people the way I think like maybe a TE Dom like an ETJ might. So
Yeah.
to clarify, like I don't really see ITJs like screaming or like not
Yeah.
knowing
I've not
why they're
seen
upset.
that actually.
Yeah, like so
Yeah,
that's a
I've seen
distinction
that
to make actually.
person.
But I will say that like inefficiency would still really stress out an ITJ. They would just probably like
Mhm.
figure out an efficient way to like translate it to someone that they're actually genuinely trying to ask for emotional support from, or just not even bother telling anyone and figure it out themselves. So I guess if you're talking to like an ETJ and they're upset and they're upset and they're actually saying something to you, chances are they want you to like put yourself into like formation so you can help them, because I think TE Doms are kind of used to like working with people more and knowing the necessity of people they also don't have FE polar, so like that's probably why they like understand this more, but they're much less tactful because they're too busy TEing to like understand. You have to be like translating what you're feeling. And I think ITJs are like when I explain it to only like some people get it, and I don't really want to figure out who's gonna get it. And it's just wasting my time. I might as well just solve the emotion on my own. So I'm just not gonna like say anything to you. But I do think that like I have formed closer relationships with certain like ITJs because I like if something's wrong, I'll like stick around and like ask them and like be curious about it and be able to like kind of finish their sentence of like, oh, like what do you think of this? Like, because I relate to the feeling you're having, and then like we can like kind of commiserate over it, and then also conclude something about what should be done or what shouldn't be done. But yeah, it's much calmer when you talk to an ITJ compared to like an ETJ. But again, these
Yeah.
are stereotypes because there's plenty of TE DOMs, especially women, that don't go around blowing up at people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like
that's true.
obviously,
Yeah.
I've also actually seen a lot of FE DOMs blow up at people too, if they're like certain. So I just think of it all as like, if you don't have your FI like well managed in a certain specific way, then like that can happen to like anyone, which is why it's kind of hard to like talk in generalities of like what people are experiencing. Because all I can say is like, if you're like mature and like self-developing, then like you're gonna like, and if you're like an FP, then you'll like experience understanding more TE and not being triggered by its solution. You'll see it as like, oh, an act of love for them to tell me like, oh, why don't you do this? Or as a way to engage with like, what am I thinking relating to like my FI? They'll never be like, you don't feel that way. Nah, nah, nah. Like they'll be like, okay, you feel that way. What are you gonna do about it? And that's actually what we need to be hearing half the time. And with a TJ, it's like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. It's like, or you could just acknowledge that you can't really do anything, and there's like a lot of strength within that.
Yeah. On a separate note, it's kind of ironic. I have no idea why, but I feel like I actually have more FP friends than FJs, and I have no idea. Like that's just how it is. And
Mm-hmm.
there are certain things that I actually appreciate more about FI, but like the FI definitely comes with the TE. So I'm like, I better learn that because it's like a
Yeah,
package. Like I can just ignore the TE part. So yeah.
I actually have more FJ friends than like I guess any other type or any other judging pair or whatever. So I get what you mean, and like all these FJs are also they actually all know each other, but they aren't like close friends like they are with me, which is really funny. And I think it comes down to like for an FJ to like grow and have their TI be stimulated, you kind of need like soft TE. And because an FP is more patient with bad TE than like maybe a TJ would be, I think that's like where the synergy comes in. And similarly, like an FJ won't judge me for my bad TI as bad as like a TP would. And I've certainly developed more TI from like the love and validation, and then sometimes like actually trying to explain how their TI works from an FJ. So yeah, to be fair, it's actually FE DOMs specifically ENFJs actually, not even FE, just ENFJs. But like I do think like FJs really enjoy the unconditional patience, I guess, that I have for them, versus they don't really get along with each other because I don't know, and maybe I don't know if you relate to this, but they say that like it feels a bit like a traffic jam with fellow FJs where you're both trying to not like trying to do the right thing socially, so then you just like are at a stalemate constantly, and there's no like original sort of like, let's throw something in the mix. What do you feel about this? Because I feel this. Da-da-da. Like FJs will be like, oh, like let's like bond over something that has low emotional stakes, and so you don't get super deep too because of that. And I guess like the FJs I know that are friends with each other, like they've developed, okay, they also know functions, so they've developed like their FI TI whatever, and they're able to like kind of crack each other more, but they still, you know, like having an FP or sometimes even a TP around to like bring out that introverted judging for them. And
Mhm.
for me, I really enjoy being around J's because I am forced to reflect on my introverted perceiving functions. So yes.
Yeah, I think so because okay, I get along really well with other INFJs, but I don't really know like a lot of them just quantitative quantity wise in my where I'm currently based. So then for some reason there's just a lot of ISFPs that I get along with. And I mean, I understand theoretically why, because we share like the SETNI functions. And their TE is the last function, so it doesn't trigger me. I mean, I actually like the fact that I like it when FPs use TE because it balances out the logic, because I care about logic, but in a TI sense. But it's easier to communicate when someone has like a more logical like
Yeah.
development. Otherwise, it can get too much emotions, and it's
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
yeah. So
Yeah, because like
I feel like I can get
FJs are
along with
afraid.
ISFPs.
Yeah, FJs are afraid to like use TI on each other, it seems. Like whenever they're friends with each other, it seems like they're just like,
That's
oh,
true.
I'm
Yeah.
bothered, but I'm like afraid. And I'm just like, fuck, you're bothering. Here's the logic. If it's wrong, let me know.
No,
But
it's really. I don't know if that's what you experience with other FJs, but I feel like when I'm with an FP type or ISFP specifically, I get really blunt. Like I mean,
you get
in
really
a fun way. Like we
blunt.
both get really
Oh.
blunt in a fun way, and it's like we are sort of like acting our inner self out. Like them being like the ENTJ-ish person, and I'm like the ESTP-ish person, but not like actually, it's just like
Yeah.
we are not afraid of like being really honest with our opinions.
Yeah. I think with I was talking about FJs to each other. They're afraid to like offend each other. And I think in my development, I've just
Yeah,
learned
I
to
feel
like,
that with FJs.
yeah, and I've just learned that like
Strangely.
my job is to like just if I want to use logic, my job is to just use TE to understand the right questions to ask someone to like guide them to the conclusion that I either think they should be doing or I want to know because I'm like, what is your objective here? If I just say what sometimes just asking like an FJ, like, okay, so what do you want to happen? Or why are you thinking that you're da da da? And this is like it's still TE that's making me ask that. I'm just not using it through the lens of like say advice or something. It's more like, let me help you dig deeper into your exploration of this issue. And then you'll be happy because I'm not here to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I'll say that, but like, that's definitely not really my priority. I'll say that and then be like, huh, it makes me curious, da da da. I've been accused by some FJs of being like, oh, like, I feel like you're trying to intellectualize my emotions. And I'm like, well, no, like you're just bitching and moaning about the same FI bullshit that like your FE just keeps trying to like go around like what other people are feeling. And I'm like, what do you feel? What do you feel? You've been like repeating yourself. Because honestly, like for FI, it's like when we start to repeat ourselves, it's almost like we're unconsciously like leaning on needing a logical solution. I think the same can happen for anyone with who's a feeler. So they need someone to like I don't think of it as like I tell them what they should do or I tell them to like shut up and just like do something else and forget about it. I'm like, okay, like let's have your logical mind come in and take care of the situation. Because like think about how soothing a therapist is. They're being logical, but they're also not invalidating why you feel
Yes.
that. So
Yes.
I think that's why FJs can crave like the FP validation because the FP will help them find something new about themselves without making them feel like they like were tyrannized or something.
Yeah, because I use a lot of TI when I hear FPs talk about their feelings sometimes, but I feel like they are fine with it because I offer like potential solutions with
Yeah.
TI. So like it's okay for them because I also didn't invalidate their experience being like a feeler. So
Yeah,
it's
you
like
probably used FE to be like, oh, like I would feel that way too, but what have you considered this? And then they're like, oh, maybe.
yeah, it's really about like developing the T function basically, because otherwise both the FP and FJ can be very wishy-washy when it comes to when they
Yeah,
face a problem, it
definitely.
just doesn't end. Yeah. So I guess like final question, like how do you think a TJ can go about developing their FI and maybe making it, I don't think they want to make it obvious, maybe for professional reasons, but just like how they can go about developing it maybe in their own time, and how FPs can do the same but for with their TE.
I mean, I guess like I feel like TJs, they really have to like understand like their emotional sort of experience and their boundaries. So I think like reflecting on like I guess like a lot of TJs I know who are very healthy, who've done it well, have gone to therapy. So there's an immediate solution for you. But if you don't want to like go to therapy, then do therapy at home, I suppose, by DIYing it, which is basically like I think reflecting on the things that have happened to you that were your most intense formative experiences emotionally, whether it's like your deepest pains or your greatest joys, and then like continuing to check in with your FI all the time. I think that's how a TJ learns to not be so reactive, because if they can diagnose why they feel something when they do, especially if you're a TE-DOM, then it's not going to bother them as much. And I think also once they learn what their FI is, they kind of learn who to not expect things from, because they don't understand their FI. Because like all the TJs I know, they like if they are like aware of their FI, they're very good at like not pushing people to do something that they don't want to do. And sometimes
Mhm.
like I think FE users think that that's like withholding information or not wanting intimacy, but I think it's just like being efficient, because certain people are more equipped to handle your emotions than others because of the nature of their FI and their priorities.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and so
I
for
think that's a
FPs,
better solution actually than making everyone do everything.
yeah, like because I think it's about containing your FI and managing it, so you're not just like. And I mean, I would say this is honestly a tip for like probably an FJ too. I think when you're a J, you really do kind of expect too much from the world at times. So yeah. And for an FP, I think it's about um learn kind of exercising. Again, this is all like therapy, but also journaling. I think exercising practical solutions to what they feel and what they can control is really important as a routine. So not just like, oh, like I have a problem. Now I'm going to make myself use logic. It's like, no, no, no. Do this for every small thing. Like every single time you feel even kind of bad, like start to like process it through the lens of like logic. Start to like kind of notice what you're concluding about the world around you and what works for you. That's like a long-term fix. Like reflecting on like the solutions that have worked. So it's like also like refining like sort of an archive of like your logical experiences and like what kinds of people give you better advice than other people. I think that it's honestly always about people, whether you're an FETI user, an FITE user. You learn more about yourself through the lens of other people. And I think that like reflecting on that, for an FP, the onus is on learning to communicate that with TE, being like, hey, like I get that like you're trying to help right now. And this is actually my objective. What do you think of this? Like, I don't know. It's like I think of like TE as very business like, but you need business in interpersonal relationships too at times. You need to be like, hey, like what's working? Oh, I hate it when you do the dishes in this way, even though I understand why you do it in this way. Can you try this way? And like it's like you need this all the time. So I think like first of all, it's about understanding the point of the function that you're trying to integrate. And again, this goes for FETI too. Like if an FJ didn't realize how necessary TI is, and if a TP didn't realize how necessary FE is, they
Mhm.
probably would not be able to integrate very well. So
Yes,
it's about,
it would
but
just fall apart.
it all comes down to like you need to have an inner sort of understanding and an inner foundational sense of like the problems that you thematically ran into in your life. And it feels like I'm talking about TI now, but I guess this is like some sort of soft applicable thing that just manifests differently in everyone. But TLDR is FPs think about solutions to your current problems instead of focusing on the fact that it doesn't feel like any solution is going to work. It's like, okay, even if it's not the solution, the point is to like learn to communicate with yourself about what's working, what's not, da da da. And for TJs, it's also about like what makes me happy, what doesn't. And okay, if this doesn't make me happy, what is the next best thing? And what makes other people happy? What makes them not happy? And how does that affect me? So I think it's about putting language to these things for both of them.
So you were saying the first point about FI in TJs, you were saying like they had to be more selective on the kind of people that they open up to?
Well,
Or
I guess like, I mean, it's not like I don't necessarily think that like that's like a problem that TJ's like, because it's like the thing that's kind of hard is you can't actually generalize very well about like the problems people have, because like there's definitely like very empathetic TJs out there that have issues with being people pleasers. So like I don't know if I can actually generalize something, but I'm just saying as a rule of thumb.
I guess we are referring to more undeveloped TJs that
I'm
need
just
help.
like, I guess my TE is like, I don't even know if undeveloped TJs will even be open to my feedback, to be quite honest, but like, sure, whatever. I guess it does come down to like a lot of the source of your undevelopment is the archetype of problem you experience is when dealing with other people. And so you have to kind of have a sense of your FI boundaries as to what you will or won't expect from people or tolerate. So you know how to like walk away if they're being difficult, or how to, if you're explaining something, getting frustrated in an FI way unconsciously, how to stop yourself or something.
Yeah, I think it's the reactivity is the parts that they have to work on from an observer's perspective, since I'm not a FITE user.
Yeah,
But
I think
it's really obvious to other people when they are very reactive. And I think they're not like aware, some of them, that they are being emotional, but in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
I think
it
that
feels
like,
like emotional connection. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that like honestly, like at this point in like my understanding of type, I think everyone deals with the same problem, just in slightly different reasonings. I think even FE, because I think at least from my understanding of it is like we still experience the other four functions we don't consciously use on some
Yeah, we
level.
do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like I think that like a lot of this advice is also applicable to like, I think that FJs also put expectations on people when they're introverted judging is unhappy or something. So it's actually kind of a similar map to a TJ. And so it's important to like have this backed up archive so you are selective in how and who you interact with when you are trying to say organize the environment. Like TJs will simply be like realistic about who they tell what or what they delegate in a professional setting. But it's also important to sometimes know that maybe you're like assuming too soon that someone can't do something when they can. And unless you have the FI like sort of discernment of yourself to question those sorts of conclusions you might just make emotionally. Again, like I'm just like so aware that like if my audience is undeveloped TJs, they have no fucking clue what I'm saying. But like laissez faire, whatever. So yeah.
Do you think this is like a factor when it comes to like dating? And I mean, this is like a random question, but I think a lot of people in MBTI likes to have this, compatibility thing going on, which I think personally, I think it's not necessarily we have to be paired with someone of a certain type. But do you think it's like a factor that you would consider, or it's someone, or are TJs like people you typically go for in that
Gosh,
aspect?
oh my god, this question is so loaded because like I just feel like there's so many like stereotypes out there. Well, I mean,
I
okay,
guess
so
like
like
more asking about your personal experience, not about the what people generally think about the
yeah,
pairings. Yeah,
well, I would say
because
like
your personal experience can be different. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for me at least, like my wounds from my childhood and in my experience are like when I've liked, I guess I would say like for the first part of my life, um, I would go for a lot of FJs and TJs, and the FJs would probably hurt me the most. I think I have like the most scars surrounding that because they would seem like they had FI, and then they would completely take it back and like say something really cutting or like kind of just shut me down in this way where it made zero sense with like the FI trajectory of how we've been sharing and like getting to know each other. So I like just flat out don't trust FJs at this point. I'll still be open to dating them if I meet like a good one, but I kind of like
So
know
you
there's
mean
always a
like
limit.
FJ males? Since you were
Yes,
saying
FJ males.
right, because you were saying like your friendship wise, you were more with like
Yeah.
FJs.
So I'm explaining this because it's in the context of the question you asked, which is dating. So I'm
Right.
saying like
Okay.
in my experience with romantic stuff, um, childhood and like young adulthood, like the first part of my 20s, I would get really hurt by FJ men, which again, I'm not generalizing about like oh, I'm just so incompatible with FJs because like all my like closest friends are FJ women. But I do think that like I look for something different romantically, and I think that's kind of the case for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And like my non-negotiable at this point is like I need someone with really good FI just because I subjectively like don't see the point of dating someone unless they make my life easier, which you could say is TE or something. But FJs in dating just made my life harder because as we got closer, I would try to lean on them more for like more vulnerable things and they would just drop the ball more. And so it was like it's always good in the beginning, like, oh my God, we share so much. And then it's like, okay, like you don't actually like care or get me on this core level in the way I want. So even like the best experience I had with an FJ, it was still like a lot of like limitations in ways that I personally can't handle. However, I know a lot of like I know a very successful ENFP INFJ couple that's been going strong for like 2 years now. And I also know like there's been FPs that date FJs. I personally think that like unless you know functions really well, you need to be really careful about that because like you don't want to project that they are more capable of understanding you until you've like really seen them. And my FJ female friends, they are open about their TI with me in a really nice way. But like with FJ men, I would not see the TI behind how their FE works until it's too late. So I don't really plan on dating any more FJs, to be honest. It's not like, oh, if I meet one or he wants to take me on a date, I'm going to be like, no, because you're an FJ. Because I wouldn't actually know if someone's an FJ until I get to really know them. But then it's almost because I don't believe in like damning it. I'm just commenting on the pattern in my life is like, I'm not going to have as high expectations for an FJ. Um, but if someone blows my mind, if I'm giving them a chance, and of course I'm going to like take that as new proof. But I personally would never date an FJ at this point. And I say that in the sense that I'll still be open to challenging that, but I'm just not going to really expect it to work out.
Right.
And I've never dated a TP. I mean, I guess I've hooked up with a couple, but like, there's no like polarity. We just become
Mm-hmm.
friends. Just leave it at that. TJs, I think, have been the biggest love hate because I really sought someone that could like use TE on me when I was younger because I so felt suffocated by having someone with TE polar. Um, so I really think it's like, oh, they're so sexy when they're just like so efficient and kind of like cold with a heart of gold and like all this stuff. And I,
It sounds like one of those stories, you know, like
yeah,
it's
I
a very
know.
popular genre. I feel like no, every time I see my NFP friends like to talk very fondly about like the you know those like shows where there's like this corporate leader or
Yeah,
whatever.
Sunda. Dude, he's like, oh, I only,
Like
it's like,
you guys need to be in one of those films. I just can see that.
oh,
Yeah,
because I was like, oh, they're so sexy. Yeah, like all these like freaking,
it's so
especially
funny.
because we're Asian. I feel like a TJ male is like the Asian girl ideal to date and like K dramas
Yeah,
or
I
like
keep seeing
anime.
this archetype. Honestly, it's like everywhere on TikTok and all those.
I know, right? And like, yeah,
So funny.
and so yeah, I was like recently kind
Oh
of dating
god.
this. I was recently kind of dating this INTJ, and it like didn't work out, but like we're still like fond of each other, and like it wasn't like a bad like fallout, but like definitely my most positive experience so far. And I definitely think that like at least for me, my idea of like what I want in a serious relationship would probably be like a gamma, so like NTJ SFP sort of person, because like I've dated like STJs before, and I'm like, like I don't
Not
really
that
want it.
great.
I don't want. No. It was like good, but I think that like when things got difficult, like if I like wanted to go like emotionally deeper, there are certain limitations because their SI will just like not see the point, and they'll still validate like if I have a problem or vulnerability, we still get along and like. But it's like if we're talking about the relationship itself, they like literally will be like, it's not worth my time da da da. But like they'll be able to engage with me if they feel inspired to. But like there were just certain behaviors that it didn't hurt me honestly as bad as like the FJs had hurt me, but it was still kind of like, huh, like to some degree, like they don't want to live life with like such an intuitive, strange person. And you know,
Yeah,
again, like
it's
I'm
too
not like
realistic.
no STJs ever, but like I do like and again, I really hope that this isn't like representative of what all ENFPs think, because like we're all really different, and our
Mm-hmm.
SI experiences shape our understanding of people a lot. And even though I intellectually understand a lot about people, I cannot ignore that my inner child needs certain kinds of things to feel safe, especially for a romantic partnership. So yeah, that's like how it is. And at the moment, I'm interested in ISFP, and that has been going on for like the better part of like 2 years. Like we've never actually been like official or anything, but I do think that like it's been my most significant crush for this time. And so yeah, that's to say it's not a TJ, but it is someone with FI. So I'm like, I definitely know that like FI makes me feel the most understood and makes me feel like I can see a future with this person, because I've never actually really seen a future with FJs. Um, I've seen it probably the most with an INTJ, ENTJ, ESTJ, and this ISFP. So that's like just my dating history. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can ask the ISFP to act NTJ because they
Wait,
do that
what?
like for fun. I don't know. It's just a
Oh,
thing
well,
sometimes.
like, so I would say the ISFP has pretty, I wouldn't say good TE, but like they definitely like understand the NTJ life because they were an advertiser. They worked in advertising, and they really care about their NI a lot. So they'd be very intrigued by my NE. So we had a lot of natural synergy, and because we both are very, very opinionated, but also very compassionate, it was just really nice. But yeah, jury's out on what's going to happen with that. But in general, I would say that like it seems like TJs and I haven't like given up on the idea of like dating them, but like I'm just kind of like, I will take what life gives me. I'm not going to be like, oh, because you're an FJ, I'm never going to give you a chance. But it's like I just know that like we're just not that interested in each other, so it's just not going to go that far. And I've seen that as a pattern, so I just don't worry too much about it. I'm just seeing that like there's more polarity between me and like an ISFP or something, or an INTJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's all very different individually for sure. Because I've seen
Yeah.
like people date all kinds of personality types that sort of provides what they need. Um,
Hmm.
as for me, I will leave it for another video because mine is
Ah.
what I gravitate towards is a bit different. Thank you, Crystal, for like talking about the TEFI topic again. And if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Okay, bye.